Hello, Accelerated Math 6-7 students. We are going to work on Module 8, Lesson 10 today, and it is called Solving Equations Using Algebra. And for the last couple of days, we have been working on real-world scenarios and problems where we've used different tools to help us solve them, and you use them a lot with tape diagrams and writing expressions and doing all of that kind of stuff. And today our goal is going to change a little tiny bit. The goal is today we will practice solving equations using algebra by substituting variables and using mathematical properties. The question that I want you to think about during this lesson is, what are the additive inverse and multiplicative inverse properties, and how do they help you? Some things that I want you to remember is part of solving for unknown information is understanding what it's asking, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to try a couple of problems, and I'm going to show you a technique that we use to help us when we have to solve problems using algebra. So we'll try it with this first problem. Susan and Bonnie are shopping for school clothes. Susan has $50 and a coupon for a $10 discount. Each shirt costs $12. Susan thinks she can buy 3 shirts. Bonnie says she can buy 5 shirts. Who is correct? So we're trying to figure out which person is correct when figuring out the total number of shirts that Bonnie could purchase. Susan says that, when Susan can purchase. Susan's equation is 12n plus 10 equals 50. And Bonnie's equation is 12n minus 10 equals 50. And so what we have to do when we're thinking about this is you have been learning to use tape diagrams to show how to find the answer. But today I'm going to teach you how to use algebra to find the answer. And so one of the things that we do is we like to discuss how they set up the equation that they have. Because here's an equation that both ladies wrote. And if you notice, neither of the equations are the same. And so what we have to do is we have to decide whose equation would actually work for the scenario. And so the way we do that is we can solve both equations for the missing information and then see which one actually makes sense. And the way that we solve them is by talking about, first of all, how the equation was built. And so we have this little tool, and it's called a build and undo chart. And basically, it's just a little table. And on the left side, you discuss, as you're looking at the equation, how it was built, okay? And then on the right side of the little table, you talk about how would you unbuild it or undo it. And so what we do first of all is we always think about when we're talking about equations, typically more so than not now, they have a variable. So your first thing that you're going to think about is whoever was the mathematician that came up with this equation, Susan probably came up with it herself, she had to pick a variable. So I'm guessing that she thinks that N is her favorite shirt, or her favorite letter. That's why she chose N, because she's buying shirts. So N and shirts doesn't really make sense, but maybe she loves N, so that's the variable she chose. So the first thing that she did is she decided on a variable. So let's say her variable was N. Then the next thing that we do on the build side is we talk about mathematically what is going on. Well, mathematically, there's something happening right here, and then mathematically, there's something right here. And when we're talking about equations being built, we're only talking about what they did to the variable. So mathematically, the first thing that you see touching the variable is this mathematical operation called multiplication. And so she multiplied by 12 first, so we're going to write that as the next step. So she chose her variable, then she multiplied it by 12, and then the last step that she did when she was building her equation is she added 10 to it. Now, let's talk about why she did that. Because we notice up here that the shirt cost $12. The N must represent the number of shirts. That might be why it's an N, because it's the number of shirts. And then she also has a discount of $10, so she wrote plus 10. All right, so now let's go over here to Bonnie's equation. And I want to get a different color because I want you guys to be able to see the difference between the two. So let me grab another color really quick, sorry. So on this side, remember, the left side of Build and undo chart talks about how it was built. The right side talks about how we would unbuild it. Okay, so now let's look at Bonnie's. So Bonnie is using N as the variable as well, probably for number of shirts. Again, the mathematical operation that's happening on Bonnie's equation first is that we're multiplying by 12 because each shirt costs $12. And then Bonnie says that instead of adding 10 to it, she's going to subtract 10 to it. Okay, so that's the biggest difference between those two equations. So now, as a mathematician, the next thing that we do is we figure out how to undo it, and that's when we bring in these properties, because I mentioned some properties up here: additive inverse, multiplicative inverse. Well, additive inverse is a fancy way to say you add the opposite, okay? And so the opposite of adding is subtracting, right? Or you add the opposite, and so over here, since we're adding 10, then we would subtract 10 because that's undoing it. And when you subtract 10 from 10, you get 0. So that's the undo part. So the opposite of adding 10 is subtracting 10. Then the opposite of multiplying by 12 is dividing by 12, and that's the multiplicative inverse. And then you're left with N. Okay, so that's Susan's. Sorry. Now let's look at Bonnie's. On Bonnie's, we multiplied by 12 and we subtracted 10. So to undo that, we always work backwards. So the opposite of subtracting 10 is adding 10. The opposite of multiplying by 12 is dividing by 12, and then we'll be left with N. So now, I keep saying we'll be left with N. Some of you are probably going, how in the world are you going to be left with N? Well, you are going to perform the undo side of the build and undo chart to the equation that you have. So let's try Susan's first. So the first step in the undo side is subtract 10. But what you have to remember that I've been teaching you since I met you is what you do to one side of the equation, you have to remember to do to the other side. So we're going to subtract 10 from this side, okay? And remember, adding 10 and subtracting 10 creates a zero pair, so draw a 0 on top of it. That's a 0. So 0 plus 12n, the only thing that you have left on this side of the equation is 12n. Then 50 minus 10 is 40. Okay, so we go over here to our undo and we check it off. We did it. Okay, the next step that it says is to divide by 12. And we remember that using a fraction bar shows division. So 12n divided by 12, well, 12 divided by 12 is 1. So we get 1n equals, and then 40 divided by 12 goes in 3.5. So then 1 times n is n, and n equals 3.5 or 3.5. Okay, and if you want me to show you work, here's 40 divided by 12. That goes 3, which is 36, and then you're left over with 4, which is, 4/12, which would actually be 3 1/3 shirts, not 3 1/2 shirts, 3 1/3 shirts. So this would actually be 3.333 if we use decimal. 3.333 repeating forever. Okay, so 3 1/3 shirts, because 3 and 4/12 simplifies to 3 1/3. So according to Susan's equation, Susan can buy 3 1/3 shirts. Okay, so now let's try Bonnie's equation and see what she does. So the first thing on our undo, oh, I forgot to check it off. I divided by 12, and then I got to n. Phew! Okay, now let's do Bonnie's side. First step says to add 10. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other to keep them balanced. So this one becomes a 0, and we're left with 12n on this side, equals 50 plus 10 equals 60. Now I got to put check mark because I added 10. Now it says divide both sides by 12, so I'm dividing both sides by 12. 12 divided by 12 is 1n equals 60 divided by 12 equals 5. 1 times n is n equals 5. Okay, so that's what we get on this side. All right, so now let's talk, because we solved it algebraically. This is called algebraically solving. Okay, we solved it algebraically. We figured out that Susan can buy 3 1/3 shirts, or Bonnie says she can buy 5 shirts. I'm going with Bonnie, because first of all, You can't buy a third of a shirt. So that should be telling your brain that something's wrong. The second thing that I want you to be very careful of and be aware of is that $10 is a discount. So that means that you're going to be able to um, keep that $10 that you had instead of actually having to use it. So technically, it gives you an extra $10, which would give you the ability to buy 5 shirts instead of only 3 1/3. Okay? So that's the key to understanding how to do that problem. So again, Bonnie's equation is correct because the shirts cost $12. We don't know how many she has. She has a discount of $10. So whatever this cost is, we're going to subtract $10 off of that, and then she will be able to spend her $50. Okay? All right, kiddos, that's that problem. All right, now you're going to use algebra again, and I would like you to try the build and undo chart, okay? And I will help you set it up. So let's read it together. Andrew's math teacher entered the 6th grade students in a math competition. There was an enrollment fee, one-time cost, of $30, okay? It costs $11 for each package of 10 tests, okay? The total bill was $51. How many packages of tests were bought? Okay, first of all, I need you to pay very close attention to this number because lots of kids, all they do is look for numbers and then they try to go. Does it really matter how many tests are in a package? No, because we don't know how many students there are, okay? We are told the total bill. We are told how much they cost. We are told the enrollment fee, so we could figure out the number of packages without ever worrying that there are 10 tests in there. So this is what we call extra or extraneous information, so don't let it fool you. So let's go back and set it up. We have a fee of $30, right? So it costs $30, and this is all a cost. So these are all the same. This is a cost, this is a cost, and this is a cost. So it costs $30 enrollment fee, right? Plus $11 for each package, so $11 for each package, and that total bill was $51. So right there is an equation. So we set up the equation, and now your job, I'm not going to do it for you, your job is to create a build and undo chart and solve for P. I want you to remember what we did up here. If you can't, then go back and listen, okay? So you talk about your variable, you talk about what happened to your variable first, then you talk about what happened to your variable second, then you undo it by doing the additive inverse or the multiplicative inverse, and that helps you solve it, okay? All right, kiddos, give it a try, and we'll see what you come up with. That's all I've got for you. Oh, our goal today, we will practice solving equations using algebra by substituting variables and using mathematical properties, which we just did. What are the additive inverse? That means add the opposite. Multiplicative inverse means to multiply by the reciprocal. And how do they help you? Because it lets you undo what you were doing before. Okay? All right, kiddos, I'll see you all later. Bye!